The following program is an original production of WICC PBS Chicago.
Tonight, the race is down to the wire for Republicans, slugging it out to face Democratic Governor Quinn in November. But will all those negative ads keep voters away from the polls on Tuesday?
And Man's Best Friend may also be Man's Best Audience, an innovative program that helps kids master reading out loud.
Plus, Mayor Emmanuel stars in a new primetime documentary, a fair look at Chicago or an image booster for the mayor. All of these stories and more on In the Loop.
Good evening, I'm Barbara Pinto.
And I'm Chris Bury. Tonight, a closer look at the race for governor in Illinois.
Lots of money being spent, attack ads, and even allegations of sexual harassment.
Primary voters head to the polls on Tuesday, and all eyes are on the bruising battle among Republicans who hope to take on Governor Quinn in November.
Don't forget the real Bruce Rauner. Dillard, the definition of career politician. Dillard.
The attack ads began right from the start in the rough and tumble Republican primary race for governor. In the most recent polls, wealthy businessman Bruce Rauner leads the field with a double-digit advantage. His main competition, Senator Kirk Dillard, now appears to be pulling away from the other contenders, State Senator Bill Brady and State Treasurer Dan Rutherford. Former Chicago Alderman Dick Simpson, who now teaches political science at the University of Illinois at Chicago, cautions that public opinion polls are dicey in primary races because turnout tends to be low.
It always depends on who actually shows up at the polls to vote, and so we can't really know, even if we have public opinion polls in advance.
Though Rauner appears to enjoy a big lead now, he stumbled out of the gate with a flip-flop on raising the minimum wage. First, he was against it.
I will advocate moving the Illinois minimum wage back to the national minimum wage. I think we've got to be competitive here in Illinois.
Then, after heavy criticism, Rauner changed his mind, deciding to support an increase in the minimum wage. But the primary campaign took a sudden shift in Rauner's favor, with stunning allegations of sexual harassment leveled against State Treasurer Dan Rutherford by a former employee. Rutherford vigorously denies the charges and blames Rauner for orchestrating the timing of the lawsuit against him.
You put these dots together, there's no question in my mind what's going on here. Someone tried to get $300,000 and is being represented by an attorney that was on Bruce Rauner's payroll.
Matt Dietrich, executive editor for Reboot Illinois, says Rutherford mishandled the allegations by not releasing an independent investigator's report as he had promised to do.
It isn't as much the lawsuit as it is the fact that he had a giant press conference to talk about these allegations. He then announced that he's going to have an internal investigation paid for by taxpayers. And he's going to release the results of this investigation. And then he comes out and says, well, there's been a lawsuit filed in the meantime. I can't release anything.
Rauner has also tilted the odds in his favor by spending so much of his own money, a record $6 million on his campaign, the maximum allowed. Dillard accused him of trying to buy the election.
But what Mr. Rauner has done is he's just made it obscene. I mean, he may own 9 multi-million-dollar mansions throughout America, but he shouldn't be able to buy the 10th one, which is the People's Mansion in Springfield, Illinois.
In a recent debate, Rauner turned the tables, pointing out that public employee unions were contributing millions of dollars to Dillard's campaign.
Why are you running in the Republican primary? I think you should be running in the Democratic primary. You've taken more government union money from the government union bosses the last 10 years than John Cullerton.
Despite all the money being spent on those relentless campaign commercials, political analysts don't expect a surge of primary voters on Tuesday.
Most voters don't have a reason to go vote unless they're really terribly concerned about the Republican nominee. There's not much on the ballot. There are several referendum, but nobody even knows they're on the ballot.
But if the polls hold, Bruce Rauner appears likely to face off against Governor Pat Quinn in November.
But it'll be the man of the people versus the big shot in Quinn's eyes. And for Rauner, he'll paint it as, I'm the moderate Republican who can get votes from everybody and win and make our government good again.
And here to bring us up to speed is Natasha Ki, political reporter for the Chicago Sun-Times. Natasha, welcome. So the Republican candidates have been ganging up on Bruce Rauner for all of his money and all of his spending, the $6 million. Kirk Dillard called it obscene. You've talked to Rauner about this. How does he respond to that?
Well, he makes no apologies for his wealth, first of all. He says that he's a self-made businessman and that he became successful through hard work. He wasn't given any endowments. The way he described his wealth, I asked him if it was true that he was part of the 1%, and he said, no, actually, I'm part of the 0.01%.
That's pretty honest.
It is pretty honest. And I think what he's trying to say is, look, I don't need this job. I'm not doing it for the money. I'm not doing it for political career. He's trying to convince voters that he's doing it because he really wants to bring change to Illinois.
At the same time, he must understand that should he win, that in the general election, the Democrats are going to make him out to be Mitt Romney, except with even more homes. Right.
He knows that battle's ahead. It's already started, actually. And, you know, it's going to be, should he win on Tuesday, I think it's going to be a bloody battle with lots and lots of money spent over the next, you know, 6-7 months.
And what does Rauner say about Dillard's allegation that he's trying to literally buy the race?
Well, he shoots back that, you know, Dillard is, you know, you're not a real Republican. You're a Democrat because you're taking all this public sector union money. The problem that Dillard might keep facing is that he did vote against the pension reform bill. And at the time, there's speculation that he was doing that to keep open the opportunity for unions to come in. And that's exactly what happened. So we're seeing a lot of union money being dumped. And it's really the last 2 weeks, hundreds of thousands of dollars on Dillard, either Dillard directly or Dillard indirectly. So it's going to be, I think, if Dillard emerges, it's going to be interesting to see what do the unions do when there's Kirk Dillard and Pat Quinn.
And all that money in the last few weeks has Dillard moving up in the polls pretty substantially. Does this now appear to be a two-man race in the Republican primary for governor?
It really does. It's really Dillard and Rauner. No one else has come close to Rauner. Rutherford had been coming close until he had a terrible setback with those sexual harassment allegations. The way he handled it questionably hurt him more. And Bill Brady he's not been able to put money together. He's not been able to get the momentum. It's Dillard who's getting the momentum. But there's a question of whether it's coming too late because Rauner he's spent so much money. He started his message early. The voters knew him since last December. He really was hitting those airwaves very hard. Of course, he had millions of dollars to do that.
You mentioned the harassment allegations against Rutherford. Did that essentially torpedo his campaign?
I would say that the allegations in and of themselves, I think a lot of people would have given him a chance. The allegations came at a questionable time. They have not been adjudicated. You know, the lawsuit has just been filed, so we don't know is there guilt or innocence there. What really torpedoed him, I think, is that he ordered an investigation with taxpayer money and then didn't release it. You know, why do you do that? And then it just raised more questions that there's something that he doesn't want to show us, that there's something more there that he's scared to hide.
He accused Rauner of orchestrating all of this. Has any evidence surfaced to support that?
The only
claim?
evidence that Mr. Rutherford could offer was that there was a payment to the attorney who was representing the employee, former Treasurer employee who's lodged these allegations. That attorney had been paid by the Rauner campaign at one point. They said it was for work. It was unrelated to anything. It was having to do with a lease, and it was I think maybe, you know, $4,000 or something. It was a nominal amount, at least for Bruce Rauner it was.
This is a Republican primary. What role have social issues, gay marriage, abortion, what role have they played in this race?
Almost none. It's been strictly on economics and the fiscal health of the state. That's what the candidates. I mean, look. I mean, if you want to hit Bruce Rauner hard, it's a Republican primary. He's pro-choice. He appears to be favorable towards same-sex marriage, though he hasn't said that personally. And so if you want to hit him on those hard, and true Republican issues, the problem is none of the three had any money to do that. So when you have unions coming in and paying for these ads, they're not going to hit them on social issues that are dear to union members. So it's been an interesting dynamic.
Is there a big difference on those economic issues, the pension reform? Is there a key difference between Rauner and the others or not?
Well, in the sense that Brady is the only one who really he voted for it and supports it. It's the pension reform bill. Dillard voted against it. Rauner and Rutherford did not have votes, but both of them said that they would have opposed it. Rauner says, yes, Rauner is probably the most different. He wants to convert it into a 401k kind of model for state employees,
which the
going forward.
Unions hate.
The unions do not want that at all.
Looking ahead, assuming for the moment that the polls are correct and Rauner does win on Tuesday, looking ahead to a Rauner-Quinn race, how do you see that shaping up? What do you think the narrative is going to be?
Well, the narrative is going to be right out of the Quinn playbook, which is, I'm a, hard scrapple guy. I pick myself up from my bootstraps, and I'm a populist governor. I'm the people's governor, and Bruce Rauner is the multimillionaire who's out of touch. However, Rauner has, as you know, a lot of money. I think there's going to be a lot of opposition research, and I think we're going to see a lot of hits against Quinn, and vice versa.
It's going to be a rough and tumble campaign.
Absolutely.
Natasha Ki, thank you so much for joining us. Now, here's a look at what else is trending this week.
Just days to go before the gubernatorial primary, and Republican candidates are battling for prime position. What will the voters say?
I just think both parties need to just practice a little bit of integrity behind what they're doing.
With the race for Chicago mayor a year away, the only declared candidate, current Mayor Rahm Emmanuel, takes center stage on billboards, buses, and a CNN documentary.
Where Finger was 4 years ago.
And what you've done today
is what I firmly believe.
Maybe he's trying to clean up his image a little bit more.
Critics argue it's free publicity in the wake of sagging poll numbers. Is a challenger waiting in the wings? The challenge to the U.S. Senate seat held by Democrat Dick Durbin, a political newcomer and a controversial and familiar candidate, are vying for the Republican nod. And is a citywide ban of plastic shopping bags in the bag? Hawaii does it, so do L.A. and San Francisco. Now a city alderman trying to go green says he's got the votes to make it happen here.
I personally don't think we need to get rid of plastic bags. You might want to reduce your consumption or think about reusing them at home, like I do.
Paper bags and plastic bags, not really. I don't know. It don't make sense to me to be focusing on that.
We will have more about First Ward Alderman Joe Moreno's proposal shortly, but first, our panel. Whitney Reynolds, host of The Whitney Reynolds Show, Anthony Anderson, Chairman, Republican Precinct Project, and Steve Edwards, Deputy Director for the Institute of Politics at the University of Chicago. Welcome to you all today.
Thank you.
Now, the primary is 5 days away, and Anthony, we'll let you go at this first. You're a Republican Party leader. Handicap this race. Is it a lock for Bruce Rauner?
It definitely is a lock for Bruce Rauner. At this point, the Illinois Manufacturers Association had a poll, We Ask America, and they had Bruce Rauner at 46%. The next competitor was about 20 points away. Dan Rutherford was at about 9 percentage points. So, this is basically Bruce Rauner's race to lose at this point, and he won't be losing a race, actually.
What are the factors you think that brought him here? Is it the cash? Is it the difference?
Oh, absolutely. I think the Republicans have finally found a person that they can pay their way to get to the dance. Now, once it gets to the dance, that's going to be a different story, meaning the general election. But the fact of the matter is, I think the union advertisements, I think they sort of hurt Dillard in a way. I mean, you had the Illinois Education Association, you had the Illinois Federation of Teachers, you had the Fraternal Order of Police, and then you had AFSCME come out to support Bruce Rauner. And then you had the State Journal Register come out, and they supported the Peoria Journal Star. These are more left-leaning organizations, and so most Republicans are wondering, well, just why are these Republicans or these Democrats supporting Dillard at this point during the campaign.
I mean, I think that definitely is true among the base Republican voters. I think the hope on the Dillard side, as you well know, is that they can help with the attacks against Rauner, maybe soften the support against Rauner. And at the same time, maybe there are some Democrats and some independents who might pull a Republican ballot.
Well, there's definitely going to be that, because the word is already out. Hey, listen, come Tuesday, cross lines, pull a Republican ballot. If you want to have any chance, come to the general election. Otherwise, this race is going to be over. And as the unions go in the state of Illinois, we may be looking at a situation like Walker up in Wisconsin, the Indiana situation, or the Michigan situation, or the Ohio situation. All of those where governors have came in and pretty much essentially gutted the unions, and that's what the plan is in the state of Illinois.
Well,
if Rauner were to place it,
Dillard's number did surge with the union support and with some of those union ads, so they seem to be working somewhat.
They softened them up, definitely.
I feel like with the younger votes too. I know I was at the dog park yesterday, and all the girls around my age, we were all talking about it, and they were like, you either know about Rauner or you don't, because all the ads were either targeted so against him or for him. So at this point, whenever you're just like watching the TV for a second, that's what people are seeing.
So you're saying any publicity is good publicity here?
You know, I think, well, one of the girls said exactly, like, you either love him or you hate him based on how you're hearing that ad.
You heard how he told Natasha Ki from the Sun-Times that he was the 0.01% of the 1%. Steve, could that backfire in the voting booth?
Well, it could, but I think, you know, what's interesting here is a lot of people who have been skeptical of his campaign would point to Mitt Romney's candidacy and the problems that he had convincing enough Americans that Romney was identifiable with their concerns. I think Rauner has taken a lot of steps, and he's done a lot of it through his advertising campaign, to try and portray himself as authentic, as relatable, as understandable. The issue here is not so much wealth, it's what that wealth says about your ability to sort of connect and understand and to authentically identify with real world concerns. I think the other thing here is I think there are a lot of Illinoisans, and we're seeing it in some of the poll results for why people have supported Rauner in the polls thus far, about his leadership qualities, about his ability to sort of stick it to the powers in Springfield. I think there are people who like what the wealth represents when it comes to independence and perhaps success. And given the fiscal challenges Illinois faces, there's a lot in the broader Rauner picture that they're trying to present that is resonating right now, at least according to the polls.
Anthony, in your eyes, who's the best opponent for Governor Quinn?
The best opponent against Governor Quinn at this point right now is Rauner, because there's going to be a contrast between, those people who always thought that, Governor Quinn was the person that's always helped the little guy. And then you're going to have Bruce Rauner, the, exorbitant, millionaire or billionaire at this point. And he's going to come across and say, hey, listen, we're going to straighten up this state. We're going to do it through a business format. We're going to straighten out the school situation in Chicago, and we're going to lower taxes. And then we're going to also create some term limits for some of these career politicians. And so from that standpoint, I think most Illinoisans want to see, hey, listen, we do need to see change in Illinois. We see that this state's going down, down a precipitous way that it can't be controlled. And so from that standpoint, maybe we need some fresh breath in the air in the state of Illinois.
I will say, though, that I would not count out Governor Quinn. He is a remarkably effective campaigner. We've seen it throughout his political career, including the last cycle where many people thought he would lose as well. It's a different dynamic this time.
Well, yeah, but
Bill Brady was more conservative.
You can't deny the fact that Illinois right now is ranked in the bottom third in terms of unemployment.
And we need someone that knows how to handle money, and he's proving that he knows how to handle his money.
The only other thing I would say, too, that would support a case for a candidate like Rauner or even Dillard, if they were to emerge, is if you look at the last 2010 general election, the difference between Quinn and Brady was 32,000 votes in the end. Half of Pat Quinn's vote came from Cook County. He only won 4 counties in the entire state. If Rauner can do even slightly better than that, and by having a slightly more moderate hue, a significantly more moderate hue, the odds would suggest that that would be in his favor. We'll see what happens. But I think if you're in the Rauner campaign right now, if you can get through Tuesday, you feel good about the broader dynamic.
If you remember 2010, too, the polls were so wrong.
The polls were absolutely wrong.
And so
the polls had Brady winning, as a matter of fact.
Right, so we'll have to see what happens here.
10 percentage points.
Let's shift gears now to another race. The mayor of Chicago. The contest is still a year away, but the only candidate so far, Emmanuel, is now starring on the sides of buses and billboards and in a CNN documentary. Critics of the mayor say this is a love letter and the timing is free publicity. Whitney, is it?
Well, it's interesting because, he doesn't like a lot of reporters to get up in his grill on a normal day. Like, you don't see Mayor Emmanuel doing a ton of interviews. In fact, he's pretty short most of the time whenever he's answering questions. So it is interesting that all of a sudden he's letting these people follow him around, and I watched the show and I was like, oh, interesting. Like, I haven't seen that side of him. On another note, though, as well, it also showed the school issue here in Chicago. And on my show, we had Brown Elementary, where we were helping, go in and help out that school. Well, we had to put our whole production on hold because we weren't sure if they were going to close or not. So it definitely hit home watching that show the other day, because those kids at Brown, if their school would have been closed, they would have had to walk across some very difficult gang lines.
Anthony, fair depiction of the city and the mayor?
Well, it is fair depiction in a sense. I think it sort of rang the lines of an infomercial, but it's clear that the mayor wants to. It's clear that the mayor wants to go further in his political career, whether it go from being a mayor to United States Senator or even President of the United States. That's clear, that's obvious. But the one problem that the mayor is going to have is the fact that, again, you're closing schools in minority communities. If you say 10% of the population in the Chicago public school system is white, but you're closing 54 schools, and all those schools are located in Black and Hispanic communities, I mean, there has to be some balance right there. You just can't say we're closing it because of the numbers. The numbers don't add up. There has to be something different. After all, these are your constituents. How will you address those concerns coming election cycle?
Steve, does this open the door for a challenger? We're hearing rumblings of Toni Preckwinkle, although she hasn't committed yet.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think a lot's been made of what President Preckwinkle did not say, and she did not go so far as to say she would rule out entirely a run for mayor. What she did say is she's running for the job she currently has, that she has every intention of filling out her term. I would take her at her word on that, but I think the fact that she didn't go further leaves open the possibility. I think it's good politics for her regardless of what she does, because it sort of adds to not only her allure, but also potentially her power and sway with others. I think the real question for those who are critics of the mayor is, if not someone like Toni Preckwinkle, then who? And that's been a perennial question in Chicago going long before this administration to the administration of Mayor Daley. Unless opponents of the mayor can sort of coalesce around somebody with organization and money, I think that things look good for this mayor right now, and this series is helping him. He's at this. This is a story that portrays him at the center of lots of intractable problems, and he's somebody who is positioning himself. He's the thrust of the whole narrative.
One more race we'll look at quickly. Next week, voters will also decide who will challenge Illinois' senior Senator Dick Durbin. He's been in office for 17 years. Republicans are running State Senator businessman Jim Oberweis. He's a perennial candidate who's won a state Senate seat. And Doug Truax, a West Point grad and a political newcomer. Anthony, how worried should Dick Durbin be? Dick Durbin, I will be a little worried, because as of now, I think Oberweis stated that he's about 8 percentage points behind in polls when it comes to a head-to-head matchup with Dick Durbin. And that's telling. I mean, in a situation like this, you have a sitting senator that's an incumbent that's that close in the polls, this close to the election. Something's not right somewhere. And just think, we're just in the primaries for the Republicans. If the Republicans see blood in the water when it comes to Dick Durbin, they're going to go after this guy full force. And it's going to be outside influences. Jim Oberweis has said some things in the past that have alienated women and minorities, I mean, the two groups that the Republicans are desperately trying to bring into the tent. Also that the incident with the Soldier Field incident with him in a helicopter, I mean, with the immigration policy.
Well, and he's run 3 times for statewide office, twice for Senate, once for governor. He's lost all 3 occasions. That's not to say he couldn't win a 4th time, but I think it's going to be a tall order if he were to be the nominee.
In TV, we can't leave during sweeps. It is a few days, it's coming up on the election. Why is he in Florida? Why is he in Florida?
That's the question this week, isn't it?
Yeah. Jim Oberweis is vacationing before the polls. We'll tackle our last topic right now, another huge political question in Chicago. Paper or plastic? Should the city ban those plastic shopping bags? One alderman says basically that most of them end up, or many of them end up as litter. Steve, is this a good idea?
Well, here's what you have. You have about 380 billion of these bags in circulation in the United States. You have some cities like San Francisco. You also have cities like Mexico City that have banned these bags. There's no question that they are a real problem from a litter standpoint, but also over time an environmental standpoint, because they don't degrade fast enough. So the question is, how do you solve that problem? Do you do it through a ban? Do you do it through a tax? Do you do it through a surcharge, or do you try and incentivize consumers to make another choice? I do think it's an important public policy question. I think it's right for Alderman Moreno to raise it. The question is, what's actually going to do it most effectively? Business owners are concerned by a tax or a ban outright, but I actually think this is something that bears real consideration.
Whitney, we'll let you have the last word on this.
Some of the grocery stores have already bought out. I know whenever we don't do our year just a month, a couple months at a time, these grocery stores could have already bought for 2 years. So it's going to cost them, and we already lost Dominic's. I don't want other people to shut their doors because of these plastic bags. And I reuse mine for my dog.
There is that.
I recycle.
We will leave it right there. We thank our guests, Whitney Reynolds, Anthony Anderson, and Steve Edwards. Right now, a little more about dogs. We can learn a lot from our pets, but one innovative Chicago program relies on dogs to make kids better readers. Take a look.
Well done. All right, you want to give him a treat?
This second grade classroom at Chicago's National Teachers Academy has gone to the dogs.
Lucy's favorite subject is lunch. She always hopes for a hot dog.
These four-legged friends do more than just show up and mooch treats. They're part of an innovative program called Sit, Stay, Read that offers at-risk Chicago public school students a chance to improve their literacy skills. The dogs provide a willing audience, tails wagging, as they help to ease students' fears of reading aloud.
Dogs are often used in animal-assisted intervention programs, mostly because they're non-judgmental.
It's really hard when you're trying to read to your friends or to your family because you're embarrassed. But when they're reading to Cozy, Cozy's not judging them, and they create this really fun bond. All of the baggage and the inhibitions go away, and they just read the book.
According to a CPS study, only 17% of third graders read at grade level. Sit, Stay, Read hopes to change that.
You might be able to read a couple of sight words like cat and hat and sat. To read an entire sentence or a paragraph and understand what you read, for a lot of folks that's really hard.
I love Sit, Stay, Read. It mixes all of the students' levels and meets them on a common ground. It doesn't matter if you're learning to read or if you're at the stage where you're reading to learn. You can all come together and read the same book about something you enjoy, and you get to visit a dog on top of that.
The program helps conquer more than just fear of reading out loud.
Sit, Stay, Read asks every year who's afraid of dogs, and I will have 5 or 6 students raise their hands, and they are absolutely terrified. By the time Sit, Stay, Read is done with their session with us, they are no longer afraid of dogs, and they are actually excited about having dogs in their home.
I like coming in there because, the dogs, they're always friendly.
And then you go ahead and pat them and say, "Good boy,"
and then just a good boy.
I have the best job in the world. I get to work with children and books and dogs, and I get to put all of them together so that children are reading better, that they are having a more secure future, because if you don't read, you don't succeed. If you don't write, you don't succeed. And putting them all together is amazing.
To learn more about Sit, Stay, Read, visit sitstayread.org.
And stick around for In the Loop, the after show. You can join our guests online at wycc.org and look for In the Loop.
We'll talk about the controversial verdict that awarded nearly $500,000 to a convicted mass murderer.
That does it for today's show. You are now In the Loop. Until next week, I'm Chris Bury.
And I'm Barbara Pinto. Good night.
Good night.